Hi everyone, because this is March and Women's History Month, I'm going to be doing a video based off of a blog post about Beatrice Portinari, the great love and muse of Dante Alighieri's life. It's been a while since I've done a Dantean video, so I'm really looking forward to it. And I do have a previous video also based off of a blog post about women in the Divine Comedy, and it notes which I didn't realize until a few years ago, and I read a wonderful essay about this. Dante was actually the historian of record for Beatrice and a number of other women. So obviously, because their names do survive in a couple of things. For example, Beatrice's father's will in a document where her husband Simone de' Bardi was selling some land to his brother, but and obviously, of course, here and there, stories about what happened, and this was the wife of whoever. But other than that, Dante really preserved their names and their stories for history, because no one would have really cared or noticed. Who cares? Oh, this will is listing all the daughters of this man, but yeah, who cares? They didn't make history. So he really, helped them to survive, which is really, really beautiful and moving. So Beatrice Portinari, Dante's muse and the great unrequited love of his life, was born in Florence, or as it was known in the Middle Ages, Fiorenza, Italy, in 1265 or 1266. Some sources believe she was only a few months younger than Dante, while others believe she was a year younger. She was one of 11 children, 6 girls, 5 boys, born to Folco Portinari in Cecilia, known as Cilia, di Gerardo di Caponsacchi. And I, looked up not a transliteration, I guess a translation of the will of Folco Portinari, because I had seen the original document scanned on some web pages, but I just, couldn't make heads or tails of the handwriting, no matter how much I scanned in. And someone was kind enough, I believe, a historical medieval Italy blog, to write what it actually said, and it provided all the names of his children. And I obviously, we don't know their exact birth dates and ages and stuff, so I basically just had to guess for my alternative history about Dante and Beatrice. She had an older sister, Ravignana, who was dead by the time their father made out his will. But in my alternative history, I guess I liked her too much. I decided to, keep her alive and marry her to someone else and make her a rebellious free spirit, at least as could be possible in the Middle Ages. Then Beatrice and her older brothers, Manetto and Ricovero, who some people believe Ricovero was one of Dante's best friends because of things he wrote in La Vita Nuova. And then younger brother Pigello, younger sisters Vanna and Fia. Presumably they were short for Giovanna and Sophia. And then more younger brothers Gerardo and Giacomo, and then more younger sisters Margherita and Castoria. And it says, who was an adult and who was the girls who were yet unmarried at the time of the will. So that's a little bit helpful. But, I guess I just, assigned them their own, I guess, what was good enough, their birth dates and birth years and the birth order and stuff like that. And also in my alternative history, Dante and Beatrice will name their second daughter Cecilia after Beatrice's mother. As Dante tells it in La Vita Nuova, The New Life, he met Beatrice when he was 9 years old at a May Day party in the nearby Portinari house. Despite his very young age, Dante nonetheless was instantly smitten with her and remained in love with her throughout his life. And I'll read that opening of La Vita Nuova, which I strongly based, the opening lines and some of the later paragraphs in the first chapter of my own alternative history, which I am very, very eager to get back to. It's number 2 or 3, I guess, in my queue of things to get down. So chapter 2. 9 times already since my birth, the heaven of light, i.e. the sun, had circled back to almost the same point, when there appeared before my eyes the now glorious lady of my mind, who was called Beatrice, even by those who did not know what her name was. She had been in this life long enough for the heaven of the fixed stars to be able to move a 1/12 of a degree to the east in her time. That is, she appeared to me at about the beginning of her 9th year, and I first saw her near the end of my 9th year. She appeared dressed in the most patrician of colors, a subdued and decorous crimson, her robe bound round and adorned in a style suitable to her years. At that very moment, and I speak the truth, the vital spirit, the one that dwells in the most secret chamber of the heart, began to tremble so violently that even the most minute veins of my body were strangely affected, and trembling, it spoke these words: Ecce Deus fortior me, qui veniens dominabitur mici. I'm sorry, I haven't really studied Latin much. At that point, the animal spirit, the one abiding in the high chamber to which all the senses bring their perceptions, was stricken with amazement, and, speaking directly to the spirits of sight, said these words, Apparut iam beatudo vestra. At that point, the natural spirit, the one dwelling in that part where our food is digested, began to weep, and weeping, said these words, Heu miser, quia frequenter impeditus ero deinceps. Let me say that from that time on, love governed my soul, which became immediately devoted to him, and he reigned over me with such assurance and lordship, given him by the power of the imagination, that I could only dedicate myself to fulfilling his every pleasure. Often he commanded me to go and look for this youngest of angels, so, during those early years, I often went in search of her, and I found her to be of such natural dignity and worthy of such admiration that the words of the poet Homer suited her perfectly. She seemed to be the daughter not of a mortal, but of a god. And though her image, which remained constantly with me, was love's assurance of holding me, it was of such a pure quality that it never allowed me to be ruled by love, without the faithful counsel of reason, and all those things where such advice might be profitable. Since to dwell on my passions and actions when I was so young might seem like recounting fantasies, I shall put them aside, and, omitting many things that could be copied from the text, which is the source of my present words, I shall turn to those written in my memory under more important headings, in the respective Latin phrases which he is hearing in his mind are in order. Here is a God stronger than I, who comes to rule over me. Now your bliss has appeared. Alas, wretch, for I shall be disturbed often from now on. And I should also explain in the footnote when he's talking about, Beatrice's age. The fixed stars, the eighth heaven as medieval people believed it, was believed to move from west to east, 1 degree in 100 years, or 1/12 of a degree in 8 years and 4 months, a phenomenon known now as precession of the equinoxes. I assigned Beatrice the birth date of December 27th, 1265 in my alternative history, and since Dante was born in May, that makes him about 7 months apart. So, from the calculations provided in the footnotes, he's basically saying she was born in very late December or very early January, so that, really does work out to what most, historians believe their age difference was. Beatrice married Simone Mone di Bardi by 1280, when she was about 15, which sadly was the norm in medieval and Renaissance Italy. It's just a myth that, most women/girls in history were married when they were all, 13, 14, 15 years old into much older men, but, it sadly was, more true than, not true in a medieval and Renaissance Italy. And he was probably significantly older than she was, maybe 20, 25 years. And some sources already say he had been, already married at least once. So, this poor, innocent, naive girl is being married off to some dude who's old enough to be her father. She was probably, terrified. The De Bardis, a prominent family of bankers and merchants, arrived in Florence around the 10th century and are probably of Celtic origin. The Portinaris were also a wealthy banking family. Beatrice's father, upon the urging of her grandma, Monna Tessa, founded Florence's Ospedale di Santa Maria Nuova, the city's oldest hospital still in existence, and I have a blog post I wrote about that hospital. Maybe I will turn that into a video in future. Though Simone had at least 3 kids, Francesca, Bartolo, and Gemma, it's not known if they were by Beatrice or his second wife, Sibylla Bilia di Puccio Deciaioli. Dante threw himself into writing poetry for Beatrice's sake, despite not interacting with her again till he was 18. All that time, he never confessed his feelings to anyone else, and even wrote poems for another woman to throw off suspicions, which, got a lot of people of the town, including Beatrice herself, thinking, why are you, having this little affair with this woman, or constantly writing, poetry about her? What, you're this disreputable guy for doing this. Many times during these intervening years, Dante caught glimpses of her at church and in the street. Each new sighting filled him with increased, renewed ardor. Finally, Dante and Beatrice met again while Beatrice was taking a walk with 2 other women. Her cordial salutation filled Dante with such great joy, he hurried home to daydream about her. Dante presently fell asleep and dreamt of Beatrice. This dream inspired the first sonnet in La Vita Nuova, and later on he's talking in this poetry, in a poem he's writing about her. Oh, I'm praising about her mouth. Oh, but don't get any ideas, you perverts. It's because she used her mouth to greet me, not for any creepy reasons. Dante continued catching glimpses of Beatrice during the next 8 years. Every time he saw her, he was inspired to press pen to paper to celebrate Beatrice and his love for her in poetry. So great was his devotion, he provided elaborate commentaries on his poems in La Vita Nuova. Around 1289, Dante had a terrifying dream that his beloved Beatrice had passed away. This vision upset him to the point of tears, but he still didn't confess his unrequited love, even when asked what was bothering him. Dante pretended he was in love with another woman, whom he didn't name. That heartbreaking dream also became the subject of a sonnet. And this is chapter 23 of La Vita Nuova, where he's describing the dream. A few days after this, it happened that my body was afflicted by a painful disease, which made me suffer intense anguish continuously for 9 days. His lucky number, what a coincidence! I became so weak that I was forced to lie in bed, like a person paralyzed. Now, on the 9th day, when the pain was almost unbearable, a thought came to me which was about my lady. After thinking about her a while, I returned to thoughts of my feeble condition and, realizing how short life is, even if one is healthy, I began to weep silently about the misery of life. Then, sighing deeply, I said to myself, "It is bound to happen that one day the most gracious Beatrice will die." At that, such a frenzy seized me that I closed my eyes and, agitated like one in delirium, began to imagine things. As my mind started wandering, there appeared to me certain faces of ladies with disheveled hair, and they were saying to me, "You are going to die." And then after these ladies there appeared to me other faces, strange and horrible to look at, who were saying, "You are dead." While my imagination was wandering like this, I came to the point that I no longer knew where I was, and I seemed to see ladies preternaturally sad, their hair disheveled, weeping as they made their way down a street. And I seemed to see the sun grow dark, giving the stars a color that would have made me swear that they were weeping. And it seemed to me that the birds flying through the air fell to earth dead, and there were violent earthquakes. Bewildered as I dreamed, and terrified, I imagined that a friend of mine came to tell me, "Then you don't know? Your miraculous lady has departed from this world." At that I began to weep most piteously, and I wept not only in my dream, I wept with my eyes, wet with real tears. I imagined that I looked up at the sky, and I seemed to see a multitude of angels returning above, and they had before them a little pure white cloud. It seemed to me that these angels were singing in glory, and the words of their song seemed to be, "Hosanna in excelsis." The rest I could not seem to hear. Then it seemed that my heart, which was so full of love, said to me, "It is true, Our Lady lies dead." In hearing that, it seemed to me, I went to see the body in which that most noble and blessed soul had dwelt, and in the intensity of my hallucination, I saw this lady dead. And it seemed that ladies were covering her head with a white veil, and her face seemed to have an expression of such joyous acceptance that it said to me, "I am contemplating the fountainhead of peace." At the sight of her in this dream, I felt such a serenity that I called upon death and said, "Sweet death, come to me. Do not be unkind to me. You should be gracious, considering where you have just been. So, come to me, for I earnestly desire you, and you can see that I do, for I already wear your color." And when I had witnessed the administering of the sorrowful rites customarily performed on the bodies of the dead, it seemed I returned to my room, and, from there, looked towards heaven. And so vivid was my dream that, weeping, I began to speak aloud, "O most beautiful soul, how blessed is he who beholds you." As I was saying these words in a spasm of tears, calling upon death to come to me, a young and gracious lady, who had been at my bedside, thought that my tears and words were caused by the pain of my illness, and greatly frightened, began to weep. Some scholars believe this is a reference to his younger half-sister, Gaetana. Then other ladies who were about the room became aware of my weeping, because of her reaction to me. After sending away this lady, who was most closely related to me, they drew near to wake me up, thinking that I was having a dream, and said to me, "You must wake up, and do not be afraid." And with these words of theirs, my wild imaginings were cut off, just when I was about to say, "O Beatrice, blessed art thou," and I had already said, "O Beatrice," when I opened my eyes with a start and realized that it had been only a dream. Although I had called out this name, my voice was so broken by my sobbing that I think these ladies were not able to understand what I said. Even though I was very much ashamed, still, somehow prompted by love, I turned my face towards them. And when they saw me, they began saying, "He looks as if he were dead." And they said to each other, "Let us try to comfort him." And so they said many things to comfort me. And then they asked me what it was that had frightened me. Being somewhat comforted, aware that nothing was true of what I had imagined, I answered them, "I will tell you what happened to me." Then I began at the beginning and continued to the end, telling them what I had seen, but without mentioning the name of the most gracious one. Beatrice passed away for real on the 8th of June, 1290, possibly in childbirth, at age 25. Dante kept writing poems for her, including one which was requested by Beatrice's brother, like probably either Ricovera or Manetto, but obviously, as I said previously in my alternative history, Dante's like best friend of her brothers was Ricovero. He disguised the reason he was there, but Dante knew he wanted a poem about Beatrice. Dante wanted so badly to present the right impression and keep his love secret, he drafted 3 poems before getting it just right. Although, like, a lot of people have suggested, did he really do that good of a job of hiding his feelings? I mean, when you have that powerful of a crush on someone, particularly for so many years, it's really, really obvious. Like when you're mentioning that person's name or like looking at that person or you think someone mentioned that person, like it basically gives you away. And in my alternative history, everyone's, joking at him. Like, did you think we didn't like realize this? We knew for years, even though we never like said anything to you. Sometime later, a beautiful woman visited Dante, cheered him up, and inspired him to write poetry for her. Dante soon felt really ashamed he took another muse and abandoned Beatrice's memory. He was then inspired to write a much longer poem to immortalize Beatrice for all time. Mission accomplished. Dante's unrequited love for Beatrice was a quintessential example of the medieval ideal of courtly love, which emphasized chivalry and nobility. Though it was based on sexual and/or romantic attraction, becoming lovers usually wasn't the end goal or something that eventually happened. Beatrice inspired Dante to become a better person and removed his evil inclination. Apart from describing her complexion and saying she had emerald eyes, Dante isn't concerned with her physical beauty. He loves Beatrice's deeper qualities. In his eyes, Beatrice was the epitome of virtue and righteousness, although he goes on and on in the Divine Comedy, particularly Paradiso, about how beautiful she is. Like, in each time they rise higher and higher in the heavens, she becomes even more beautiful to look at. And then he apologizes at one time. Oh, I'm sorry I described that beautiful song as the most beautiful thing I ever heard because I haven't described my lady yet in this canto. Beatrice also has the distinction of being the only person to address Dante by name in the Divine Comedy, which happens but a single time. And there's, some scholars believe, like, in the Middle Ages, it was considered like, oh, you're drawing attention to yourself. You don't want to seem, like, totally prideful by, like, calling yourself by name or mentioning your own name in your works. And particularly Dante, he makes no bones about the fact that pride was the sin he struggled the most with. So basically, he's trying to, like, reform himself while he's still on Earth by not, like, mentioning his name over and over and over again. And some people also believe she called him by name, not just because, like, the personal impact and, like, hearing his name spoken by a loved one, that's such a powerful experience because there's a big group of people there. So it's not going to be obvious who she's talking to if she, just speaks in general without, like, using a name. Canto 31 of Paradiso gives me goosebumps when Dante reverentially addresses Beatrice for the final time, saying she left her footprint on the floor of hell for his sake, and praying he'll be in this highly purified state until it's his time to rejoin her in paradise. And this is the Mark Muse translation of that because it's one like I have right in front of me anyway, although I obviously do have a number of other translations on the shelf behind me, and I do still have to do like a more bookshelf tour videos talking about my Dantean shelf. I did not say a word, but raised my eyes, and saw her there in all her glory crowned, by the reflections of eternal light, not from that place where highest thunder roars, down to the very bottom of the sea, is any mortal sight so far away, as my eyes were from Beatrice there, but distance made no difference, for her image came down to me unblurred by anything. O Lady, in whom all my hope takes strength, and who for my salvation did endure, to leave her footprints on the floor of hell, through your own power, through your own excellence, I recognize the grace and the effect of all those things I have seen with my eyes. From bondage into freedom you led me, by all those paths, by using all those means which were within the limits of your power. Preserve in me your great munificence, so that my soul which you have healed may be pleasing to you when it slips from the flesh. Such was my prayer, and she, so far away, or so it seemed, looked down at me and smiled. Then to the eternal light she turned once more. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider leaving a comment. Maybe you can let me know if you know a lot about Beatrice Portinari, what your experience with reading Dante is. Have you ever read Vita Nuova? Have you had an unrequited love like that yourself in your lifetime, or just like things in general? Maybe suggestions for some more Dantean videos for me to make in future. And thank you guys very much for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you very soon. Bye.